Hello and welcome to an online event by Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. My name is Timur Umarov. I'm a fellow at Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center based in Berlin. And today we are going to talk about China's evolving role in Central Asia. So this event is a part of multi-year Carnegie Asia Programs project that has been exploring China's adaptive strategies and examining how Chinese actors respond to local players, local partners' demands across 7 global regions. And this event is focusing on one of those regions, on Central Asia, and I'm pleased and honored to be hosting this event with a great panel. First, we have Berikol Dukiev, who is a postdoctoral scholar at Nazarbayev University in Astana. Um, we also have Adil Gafarov, who is a PhD student in Southern Illinois University, and Nargis Kasyanova, Senior Fellow and Director of the Program on Central Asia at Harvard's University's Davis Center. Welcome all. Thank you so much for joining. And I mean, China in Central Asia. There have been so many publications, events on this topic, and I think there is an infinite amount of discussions that one can have about this particular topic. But today we're going to be focusing on how China combines its hard and soft power, and why in some countries hard power is possible in Central Asia and why in some countries it's not possible. And the main key of that impossibility of using hard power by China in some of the countries is, of course, the nature of how China is becoming more adaptive to different countries. But I wanted to start with Nargis, and you have published a piece with Carnegie's Asia program, also under China Local Global Project, about how China is using the it's foreign aid, how it's using different types of gift giving to win the hearts of Central Asian ruling elites. And I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on that topic and give us a view about how this modern form of gifting and what kind of inter-elite relationship does it create and foster between China and Central Asia.
Thank you very much, Timur. It's an honor and pleasure to be part of this panel and to present a little bit the paper that I wrote for the Carnegie project on local global China. Let me tell you a little bit about the origins of the paper. Many years ago, in 2008, I went to Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan to study, kind of to look at the infrastructure projects, new infrastructure projects that were funded by Chinese concession loans, built by Chinese companies, and that was a fairly new development in the region. At the time, nobody else had the money. China had the money. It was giving these substantial loans to build roads, to build the grids, and so on. So I thought it was an interesting kind of an interesting development worth looking at. So I went there. Then I wrote a book. Not a book. I wrote a paper. And I sort of discussed China as an emerging donor in Central Asia, and kind of discussed the characteristics of these Chinese development assistance, how it's different from kind of traditional Western development assistance, how it's part of the kind of China's rise. I framed it as part of China's soft power, and kind of talked about the the ongoing geopolitical shift, implications for the region, and all that. Sort of the kind of the normal framing, normal story, and then I wrote a bunch of papers on China's Belt and Road Initiative in the region. So it was part of the same framing. Then during the pandemic in 2020, I was reading up on China-Central Asia relations through the ages, and I came across a book. It's called Chinese World Order, and it was a volume edited by Harvard late historian John Fairbank. And in this book, he and his colleagues they were describing the relations between the Chinese court and neighbors through the ages, and they framed these relations as a tributary system. Why tributary? Because it was based on on this set of ceremonies and norms, and the rulers of these neighboring countries, they would go themselves, so they will send envoys to the court. They would bring tributes, presents, usually some local product, and there will be a very scripted ceremony, and then the emperor will also there will be a gift exchange. So they will bring gifts, they will receive gifts from the emperor, and it was a very important ceremony, sort of setting up the order. Yeah. And with the this China-centered order, where the emperor is at the top, and then he's a benevolent, maybe leader is not the right word, but that's the centerpiece of the system, right? And then everybody else is attached through these tributes to the emperor. So that was the ideal normative order. In reality, it didn't work this way. So vassals sometimes they wouldn't be loyal. So sometimes they wouldn't really consider themselves as as vassals. Nevertheless, that was a normative order, somewhat similar to the current liberal world order, right? It's also not working exactly in line with all the principles and norms. Nevertheless, there are these principles and norms that everybody knows about. And while I was reading it, I had these pictures of the BRI fora, in my head, and I thought, okay, that's sort of the court, and that's sort of this gift giving, right? Maybe not exactly the gift exchange that you had in the past, but you have this benevolent leader, right? The big powerful country that considers to be very central, right? And that develops these relationships with the neighboring states, but we know that it went much beyond. So now it's global, and I started thinking in these in these terms, and I think we see some patterns. It's not exactly, of course, it's not the same. We don't have the tributary system of what happened in the past is in the past, but we do see the emergence of this China-centered world, and definitely China sort of presents itself as this benevolent power, ready to help. So that's the idea, with which I approached writing that paper. And well, when usually when you have a good idea, you start checking and you see that other scholars wrote something similar. So I found that Daniel Markovits, Austin Strange, and Dustin Tingley, they used the idea of foreign aid, and they looked at what China did in the past, and they connected the present and the past. But I think I contributed a little bit, and I used Central Asia as a case study.
Yeah, I seriously think that these part of the relationship between China and Central Asia is seriously under-researched, and I think your paper sets the ground for many more hopefully researchers that we need to really understand what are the different dynamics and what are the different characteristics. We will go back to this a little further during the Q&A, but I wanted to turn to Berik Bol now about and ask about the transition that we're seeing in China's approach in its soft power in Central Asia. And Nargis, in her piece, was focusing her attention mostly on the intra-elite relationship and exploring and explaining how China really cares about the relationship between its leadership and the leaderships in Central Asian countries. But in your piece, you also start the piece from pointing out to this fact. However, you also say that in Kazakhstan, in the last couple of years, we see the transition of China's focus to a broader people-to-people relationship. How would you explain that? What had happened in the last several years that made China to go a little bit further from fostering the only inter-elite relationship to making its reputation better in the eyes of a broader population?
Yeah, thank you so much, Timur. And I'm also very delighted to be part of this panel. So continuing the Professor Kasenova's argumentation regarding this gift giving and intra-elite interactions between Central Asian countries, particularly Kazakhstan and China. So those, as you mentioned, increasing people-to-people interactions is rather complementary of that. So it's not mutually exclusive, and they are totally, I mean, the Chinese side totally shifting towards the people-to-people interactions. So in the last, I would say, yeah, it will be the almost couple of years, plus minus less than decade, we see that despite those interactions between China and Kazakhstan, anti-China sentiments in Kazakhstan is not decreasing. We see that from the public polls, although they sometimes show a bit pitchy and contradictory results. But anyway, those, unlike other Central Asian countries in Kazakhstan, they are not decreasing. And we see that that can be exemplified with, of course, the well-known cases of the nationwide protests that happened in 2016 regarding the land issue. Also, quite a bit before COVID, there was a protest regarding the establishment of the joint Kazakh-Chinese enterprises. And during the COVID, it was applied of the ethnic Kazakhs in Xinjiang that also gathered a lot of media traction, as well as the created some sort of activism, both including specifically mainly by ethnic Kazakhs from Xinjiang in Kazakhstan. So I guess all of these issues leads for Beijing to focus towards the people-to-people interactions as well as safeguarding the economic interest in Kazakhstan, which is the economics investments in all spheres is among the highest across the Central Asian countries. And I guess it also needs to be added that we see that such interactions from other Western countries has provided successful results. For instance, for European Union, for the United States, or mainly the Western countries, right? So that does mean that those previous attempts, what China has been doing in Kazakhstan or in any other part of the world, such as like the opening the Confucius Institute, like increasing the numbers of the those who are studying Chinese languages or culture, or the cultural efforts, all of that there. But I guess what we see in case of Kazakhstan is with regards to the more that after the opening of the China following the COVID, we see that the efforts and the dynamism, as well as the number of initiatives, is skyrocketed. So I will talk more about that in more detail. Yeah.
Would you also add to this list of the events that happened, Kanti Kantar, the massive protests that happened in Kazakhstan in January 2022, that also have changed the perception of Kazakhstan society in the eyes of decision makers in Beijing? Or would you not add this to this list? And also the second question, what are the examples? What are the efforts that China is taking to promote more positive perception of itself through media, cultural exchanges, or tourism initiatives?
Right. Yeah. So that's very good question regarding the January protests that occurred in 2022. It's totally, I guess, for the domestic audience, it was the sort of signaling within Kazakhstan that the role of China in the future, both for the elites and as well as for the population, would increase and would be vital. And we see that it's not that Kazakhstan elite is not that united and not cohesive in terms of guaranteeing long-term stability of Chinese investments. So rather focusing on those people-to-people interactions in the long run would give more sustainable results to China. And I guess we can look from that perspective. And at the same time, following those protests, the Kazakhstan President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev has several times emphasized the role of China in terms of building those, more strengthening not only the economic relationship, as Kazakhstani leadership has been focusing on the last 30 years, economy first and politics, but as well as those other types of the relationship, including the cultural ones, right? So I guess Kazakhstani society also understands that and makes the contribution towards that. So regarding the second part of your question on the what are those initiatives, so it's interesting to note that it's one of them is media. So we see that bilateral meetings between the regional leaders of media has been increased, so that has been attracting the opportunities in terms of making business with Chinese side and learning how to do business in China as well. And that's been promoted by interestingly to note from not only the media from the central part or the other parts of China, as well as presenting China through Xinjiang. So we see that they try to emphasize the cultural affinities between Kazakhstan and Xinjiang, both of them Kazakh speaking, and they have the long ties of history and culture. That's why we see the increase of dubbed movies or films, as well as the cultural events, discussions in terms of the like exhibitions and museums, culture. At those examples takes and such meetings at a high level has been increased recently. And it should be noted that Kazakhstan is also taking this own stance and proposing the details of such events, and I guess towards more focusing in terms of more on the bilateralism of such events and the interactions.
Thank you, Berkbol. After reading your piece on China's soft power in Kazakhstan, I've been listening to Dimash Kudaibergen's songs for several days, and I should say that I understand why some people get captivated by his voice. Odil, let's move on from soft to hard power. There are, as you write in your piece, boots on the ground. There are boots on the ground of some Chinese private security companies in Central Asia. And my question is, why do we see the PSCs in some countries, Central Asia, and in some countries we don't? What are the drivers of growth of those companies being present in Central Asia?
Thank you, Timur. I think the phenomenon of private security companies in Chinese foreign policy is, overall pattern, not only that exists not only in Central Asia, but overall in where China, invests in infrastructure projects. And the private security in China have existed long before, starting from opening up policies. But those companies were mainly bodyguarding companies that protected the offices of international organizations, embassies in mainland China. Two main factors that significantly influenced the expansion of these so-called private security companies abroad. The first one is the um, go out policy, and the second one is China's Belt and Road Initiative. Well, as you may know, at the beginning of early 2000s, Chinese government encouraged Chinese business, specifically state-owned enterprises, to go abroad and invest there. And because of that, more than 1 million Chinese nationals started working abroad. And some of these projects were invested in the countries with a very volatile and unstable political life and insecurity. Countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, DRC, and so forth. And of course, there were attacks on Chinese assets and Chinese nationals. But not only in unstable regions. The attacks happen in stable regions too. So China had to do something. And by that time, there was an ongoing reformation of People's Liberation Army. By that time, it was, as you remember, it was 3 million people, and then the Chinese government just cut million people from 3 million to 2 million people, and you have more than 1 million people unemployed, and private security sector was a very good place to go, of course. And with the Belt and Road, the number of projects has increased significantly. Of course, this created a niche for some people, and also demand. So there've been severe attacks on Chinese nationals, and there were ongoing debates in Chinese society what to do. At the beginning, Chinese state-owned enterprises tried to hire Western private security companies, British, South African, Australian companies to work with, but they soon realized that they have a lot of problems with them. First of all, language barrier. Second, the sensitive information, especially to R&D information and so forth, and overall cultural problems with among the Westerners and Chinese. And they soon realized that they need to create their own companies to protect their own people. And again, this was also demand from the bottoms to the authorities. So yeah, they started creating their own companies. I'm telling you so far the conventional theory of how they were created. There are some speculants, especially military experts, that say that the main purpose of these companies is actually to project China's power abroad. I will talk about it later on. But so far, two factors: China's Go Out policy and Belt and Road Initiative. Well, then I need to say that they arrived in Central Asian region very late. They first, of course, they were in Africa, then Southeast Asia, and then in Central Asia. There are there were some attacks on Chinese businesses and nationals in Central Asian region, specifically in Kyrgyzstan, for example, in 2014, 2019. There was clashes between Chinese workers and locals. And also there was an attack on a Chinese embassy in Bishkek in 2016, and numerous anti-China protests overall in the Central Asian region, not only in Kyrgyzstan. So of course this created a demand. If you try to see at the situation from a Chinese business perspective, you can see that at some point they were disappointed with the previous policies that they proceeded. Here, I wanted to just a little bit add to what said Professor Kasanova and Birikbol about the this soft power relationship between local elites and Chinese authorities. Chinese authorities faced the situation when there was nobody to talk to. There was literally nobody. What if the potential the specific Central Asian country was overrun by the protesters or civil unrest, and so forth? So what to do in this situation? They had to outsource for some other resources, and that's how they started deploying private security companies in Central Asian region, starting from 2016, if I'm not mistaken. So again, demand, of course, not only economic but also political demand in the region created this demand for Chinese authorities to deploy them. And I would like to mention that the term private security company is kind of misnomer in the Chinese sense, because they're not really private. Like even the Chinese term for these companies is it doesn't say that it's private. Like it's Sanbao Gongsi, which literally says security company. In all Chinese, first of all, this is specific of Chinese language. They don't use that. But again, I think this is those little things that China, the Chinese language has, that everybody knows that they are not really private. So they're a security company, kind of same people, the boots on the ground, but with the different labor employment contract status.
Yes, I think we can go and talk about the nuances of Chinese language for another couple of hours, actually, maybe even more. But I completely agree with you that sometimes the translations of specific terminology can kind of change the perception of specific Chinese activities or Chinese political kind of actions in different parts of the world. But what can we do with that? Moving on, as I understand you correctly, the nightmare scenario for Beijing in Central Asia would be that they will not have a contact with the leadership, and that they will be left in the unknown about what are the, what is the agenda of Central Asian political leadership, not only towards China, but also in their domestic policies, considering that Central Asia is a very important part of the world for China's western provinces, for Xinjiang, and from the Beijing's perspective, stability in Xinjiang is very much tied to the stability in Central Asia. So would you say that that's the main kind of point of China's being so actively present in security of Central Asian countries?
Yeah, of course. Here, the issue of Xinjiang is one of the most important, of course, for the Chinese authorities now, especially after the what was going on in recent years in Xinjiang. But I also want to pay attention to two things that has changed China's policy in Central Asian region. Two things. Well, first of all, January 2022, political unrest in Kazakhstan, and February 2022, Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And as a result, Russia was, distracted on its western side, and it was it kind of created this condition for China to be more active in a security sense. There are two main fractions among Chinese elites that we can see when it comes to Central Asia. The first fraction, and its majority one, is the fraction of diplomats, those or peacemakers, those who state that China must work with local authorities, must strengthen them, give them everything what they what they can do in order to protect Chinese interests, economic interests in the region. So working with local authorities, local police, local military, and so forth to to make sure that there is a stability in the region. But there's also the second fraction of so-called hawks that say that there's nothing to rely on Central Asia. That China needs to have boots on the ground, that China needs to have some means to protect its people. And this is an ongoing debate for at least the last 20 years. And both sides have published tons of papers, academic papers in Chinese. I'm pretty sure that you saw some of them in that, especially from the second fraction that is coming from People's Liberation Army Academy or Minister of Public Security Academies. Scientists from both sides are publishing, and there's this so-called debate. And after 2022, seems like the second fraction kind of started seeing that, okay, the diplomacy is kind of not working. Maybe we need to have some other options. And as a result, the China's Global Security Initiative comes right in April. It's not a coincidence. It was a necessary thing to do because as I know from my conversations with the Chinese side, with the Chinese think tanks, with the Chinese military people, military thinkers, they were pretty much shocked and surprised by what happened in Kazakhstan in January 2022, and that they realized that they did not understand the region well, not that well as they thought or as they wanted. And this again creates this demand for, increasing this security policy in Central Asia. And as a result, we can see that a lot of different security organizations in China now are interested in investing in Central Asian region, especially with the countries where such unrest potential may exist. And these are not just private security companies, as we see now. First of all, it's a government agencies, of course. It's the People's Armed Police, and then Ministry of Public Security. So PAP, MPS, and PSCs are the three main sources, three main tools what the Chinese government is actually now trying to use in order to leverage its security interests in Central Asia. As you see, China is using kind of like a police force and this also means that they are mostly interested in, first of all, securing their Xinjiang province, because, well, Xinjiang province is kind of related to the police authority, not the military authority in Chinese hierarchy. So yeah, this is continuing of China's domestic policy that now goes to Central Asian region.
Yeah, in a way, it expands its security apparatus from within to also cover at least the neighboring regions. Thank you very much, Odile. I want to go back to Nargis, but before I do, I want to encourage our listeners and the people in the audience, if you're watching us on YouTube, leave a comment. If you have a question, ask it in the comment section as well. First, Nargis, I wanted to ask you whether or not you agree with Odile about his take on the fact that January 2022, the Khandi Khantar has changed completely the mindset of people in Beijing about their approach to Central Asia, about their presence in security in Central Asia. And then I would want to go to the question from the audience. I will paraphrase it a little bit. The question is about the growth of debt obligations that Central Asian countries have towards China. And if I understand the question correctly, it says whether or not these obligations are big enough or significant enough that we should take them into consideration when analyzing the situation in Central Asia. So, Mike goes to you.
Thank you very much. First, on security front and the Kandar events, I think the Chinese policymakers, like everybody else, found this impressive and kind of unexpected. But I would think that first, it's not the first political upheaval in the region, right? So they saw what happened in Kyrgyzstan several times, right? And they kind of so I think there is understanding that things like that can happen in the region. But probably Kazakhstan was more surprising because it's the most kind of established and kind of the richest country in the region, development kind of institutions, apparatus, security apparatus, and all that. So I think it made an impression. I think February, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine made an even bigger impression on Beijing. So kind of probably the perceptions of the kind of security and stability in Eurasia at large changed, right? But I wouldn't tie it so much with the Global Security Initiative adopted in April 2022. I think it is global. It is global. So, and it's part of the overall China's security expansion, right? With like a base in Djibouti and like more security cooperation. PLA doing more exercises, with partners. PAP also doing international cooperation. So that precedes 2022, and I think that's sort of the formulation. So Xi Jinping came up with all these global initiatives, right? Development, security, civilization. So I would agree that it made an impression, but I would not tie it with the global security unveiling of global security initiative. And it seems to me that it's super interesting what Odile said about these two factions, and I'm so envious of you Chinese speakers who can kind of really trace these debates and in China. But it seems to me that it would be impossible to have one without the other, to have the second thing without the first thing, because you need to have this government-to-government cooperation. That's the base, yeah, and then you can do everything else. So you cannot have private security companies without having kind of PAP cooperation, PLA cooperation with the counterparts in the region. The question, the question about debt. Well, definitely it needs to be taken into account. The indebtedness, especially Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, are heavily indebted to China, to Chinese Exim Bank, and now there are new projects, right, that are being developed, and there is more Chinese funding. So of course that's a big factor, but I don't think they cannot work in the region, with these debts. And there are other factors apart from the debt. It's the business environment, and kind of the level of corruption and all that kind of need to be taken into account if you want to invest in the region, want to work with the region. Well, Timur, there was a question about political, the kind of.
Yes,
right?
it was China's
Yeah,
the effect.
is the direct influence on the alignment of political forces? A very interesting question. I would say not yet. And non-interference in domestic affairs, that's one of the principles of Chinese foreign policy, one of the 5 principles of Chinese foreign policy, and I think they abide by it. And basically what we see in the paper, I kind of describe the adaptation to to a succession of Kyrgyz leaders, right? That they would develop relationship with a particular leader. The leader is gone. They develop relationship with a new leader, and it's interesting to see that kind of the leadership also, the elites adapt if prior to taking the political position, they might have some kind of express anti-Chinese sentiments. Once they are in power, there's a very clear understanding and recognition the role of China, kind of the usefulness of China. So they immediately start cooperating with China. So it's very structural in this regard. So I would say no, that's the last frontier. Yeah. The non-interference in political affairs, but kind of they're watching what's going on, and they are not doing what the Westerners are doing, in a sense that kind of meeting with the opposition, with kind of looking at different players, working with the NGOs, with media, and so on. They're very kind of focused. There are these people-to-people relations, but that's not political. That's how it describes the situation.
Yeah, I would say that in a way, China's presence or China's significance in Central Asia is a kind of a matter of fact, and no matter who is in power, they will have to have not only some sort of relationship with China, but a very good relationship, so that they can rely on China, at least in economic dimension.
And can I add, and in political,
Sure.
Although there is non-interference, I would say now China provides this political umbrella for Central Asian states. So it's so important that China, keeps repeating that we support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Central Asian states without providing security guarantees, obviously, right? But it's important that they keep saying that, and it's more important than ever.
Talking about sovereignty, we have a second question about a competition between Russia and China in Central Asia for influence. I want to ask this question to Odile. What do you think about whether or not this competition really exists, especially in the regional security?
Thank you very much. It's actually very hard to answer unless you do not have a big number of insights into what's going on between these agencies, whether it is really a competition or not. It's hard to say. I can only share my own perspective and my own experience with the region. Again, I might be wrong, but seems like it's both, because in some cases, China is actually probably competing with Russia, but in some other cases, they are coordinating their actions. So the increase of Chinese security presence in Central Asia, I don't think it was not agreed with the Kremlin. I think just Russians didn't really didn't say anything. So it's very complicated relations between these two great powers. But again, I think you wrote very good piece on this very recently, where you also mentioned that there's also role of Central Asian countries. We shouldn't forget. It's just not just Russia and China in the region, as many Western analysts write in their papers, and they totally forget about the agency of Central Asian states. It's the Central Asian states that are also trying to compete them and cooperate them at the same time. So yes, the Chinese presence is increasing, and it's backed up by money, a lot of money. But again, what I saw, at least, and what I think, China is still not a match with Russia so far, because well, there's more than 100 years of common history with Russia and Central Asia, and for Central Asians, as I speak with local Central Asian authorities, local military people, security people, I know that they say that Russians are at least predictable. We know Russian mentality. We understand them. We know how to talk with them. We know what to expect. It's very difficult with Chinese, where there's not much in common in culture, in language, in history, and so forth. So it's not really easy thing to predict and to cooperate with them. There is a cooperation, but it's not as close as with Russians. And there's one small example that I can provide, is that if you're just imagine if you're a representative of Chinese state authority, I don't know, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or Ministry of Public Security, or Ministry of State Security. It's one thing, but it's another thing if you're representative of FSB. FSB's badge actually opens so many doors in Central Asia, and it's not really comparable with MSS or MPS. It's much easier for them to talk. And most of these people, both from Central Asia and Russia, they studied at the same places, same academies, or they the same training centers and so forth. So there's much more in common among the Russians and Central Asians than so far with Chinese and Central Asians. So again, there is a competition, but there's also cooperation. And if there is a competition, I would say that Russia is still prevailing.
Yes, I would agree with you on that. We have a third question. I would ask it to Berikpol, if I may. Did Kazakhstan have some leverage to cut out better deals between them and the Chinese government as compared to Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan due to having greater natural resources and political stability? Would you agree that this is the case?
I would say rather partially. So if we compare Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, there might be some sort of a deals. Like in terms of statistics, we can see that at least in terms of available statistics, we can see in terms of loan and credits, those countries are more dependent on China rather than, for instance, Kazakhstan. But at the same time, in terms of the same about the natural resources export to China that we see, as well as Kazakhstan might have, and also the sharing the direct and long border with Xinjiang, that might give some sort of a leverage and get some concessions from China. But at the same time, as we, I guess, more or less sort of discussed today, that the expectedly stable country as Kazakhstan has no longer that image in the mindset of I don't know, Beijing officials or anyone else. At the same time, with the effect of the sanctions on Russia and Kazakhstan being part of the Eurasian Economic Union, At the same time, the economic situation is like economic gap is increasing in Kazakhstan. So there are a lot of domestic issues that come under the surface following the like 30 years of development, of more than 30 years of declaration of the independence of Kazakhstan. And of course, in all of that, there is intra-elite contention and I don't know, 4 or 5 years forthcoming elections in Kazakhstan. All of that makes the issue of the political stability is no longer applicable to Kazakhstan. And at the same time, I guess we also have to discuss in response to this question whether we are only discussing what's available in terms of bilateral trade and investments, but also the hidden loans and hidden investments, and as perhaps it's available on the news that we don't know exactly, for instance, how much Kazakhstan gets out of these joint enterprises exactly, right? What's the impact in terms of to the environment? How the people who live in the regions where those enterprises or investments have been opened and functioning and benefiting from that. So there are a lot of open questions. Whether that questions are, I'm not sure whether that question's been on the table while Kazakh and the Chinese state making those agreements, and that's why that is. At least from my understanding, it makes the sense that Kazakhstan is more dependable than China. But if you compare Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, yeah, there are some partial truths to that. Yeah.
We should wrap up soon, but before we go, we still have 2 questions, and I would ask Nargis and Odil to be concise. Since we're talking about money, and Berigbo started this discussion already, my colleague Mike Nelson is asking about the role of corruption in Central Asia. And Nargis, what do you think, whether Chinese money has made things worse with corruption in Central Asia?
Well, unfortunately, the role of corruption in Central Asia is considerable. Well, if you compare Western business people and Chinese business people, Western business people are under more constraints due to domestic legislation trying to limit corruption than Chinese business people. But of course, now the Trump administration has paused the Foreign Corrupt Practices, I think that's how it's called, Act, in order to increase the competitiveness of American companies in the world. So of course it it feeds corruption, but Chinese money is not the only money that feeds corruption. There have been a number of scandals with Western companies. The ground is sort of fertile, and the Kazakhstan has been trying to address this issue by making an enclave with the based on common law at the Astana International Finance Center. So the situation is better, and there have been some measures, but we do have the problem. I would following up on what Adil said. I think it's Russia that feeds corruption much more. It's much more entrenched there, and it's it's more hidden. It's more hidden at the same time because Chinese investments, Chinese projects, they attract a lot of attention. So there is maybe not on purpose transparency, but when something happens, immediately there is attention. Like this legislation that. The protest that Berigbo mentioned, right? The land protest in 2016, right? People went into the streets because they thought that these are Chinese companies who will be renting Kazakh land, and then it turned out that Russians, read much more land in Kazakhstan, and nobody was aware about it, until the process. So I would say kind of it's Russia we should look to, and all these very kind of dense connections between individuals and groups. So yeah, let me stop here.
Thank you. Odile, the last question goes to you, and the question is about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's role in, I guess, security activities of China in Central Asia, but maybe a little more than that.
Sure. Well, there's the same. Shanghai Cooperation Organization still, plays a certain role in Central Asian region, but it's because of the old mechanisms that existed at the early 2010. The regional anti-terrorist structure, training exercises between SCO member states. I think the last one was in 2023, and it is expected that the new one will be in Belarus in 2025 July, if I'm not mistaken. So there is still ongoing kind of training, but again, my subjective personal opinion is that I think the original Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it died in 2019. Like the SCO that we have now is something new. It's not the SCO that we used to know. It's not the SCO that was created in 2001, because the functions of organization has changed. It have changed seriously. It's not a security organization anymore. And maybe it's not even an economic cooperation organization, because if we do a simple data analysis and data comparison of the consensus points that were made in joint communiques and simply calculate them, we will see that there's dynamics starting from 2001. 70% of common agreements were on security. So we can conclude, okay, the security was the most important thing for member states. But then it started kind of shifting, and by 2017 it was 50-50. So security from one side and economic cooperation from another side. Then from 2017 to 2019, it was mostly economic cooperation agreements. But after that, after 2019, we see more agreements on the third topics: culture, youth development, traditional medicine, that kind of stuff that was not really much important for SCO at the beginning. So it's very different organization with a big number of members and co-members, the affiliated companies, affiliated states. So again, it's a very different organization now. In China, Chinese authorities, they're kind of disappointed with the SCO structures. That's why they started doing their own stuff, because they tired arguing with Russia on a lot of stuff, and they also tired of arguing with India. I've personally seen these arguments. As you may know, I was affiliated with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization when I was in Beijing, and I had an opportunity to present in some of these meetings in the secretariat of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and I had a opportunity to talk to the official representative of these countries, and I asked these uncomfortable questions, especially to Indian side, which was literally dumping all of the initiative, security, economy, doesn't matter. And I asked them, like, why you're doing this? Like, we're succeeding so much. Why you're dumping? And his answer was, it was very brutal, but also very realistic. He said, Uzbekistan was the country that used to dump all of those statements, earlier, before, and the organization survived. So now Uzbekistan is the most active member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but we're like kind of doing the same stuff. We'll be okay. Like, we will think about our own national interest first. So this was a very strong and compelling answer to me. that now the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is dominated by the national interests of every specific state, and because of that, it will not be as successful as we wanted. So again, yes, the mechanisms still work, but they're old mechanisms. The new mechanisms are, well, there's nothing new. So yeah.
Thank you, Adil. On that note, unfortunately, we'll have to end our discussion. We have limited time, unfortunately. But I want to thank once again all of our panelists, Berikbo, Nargis, Odil. It was a great discussion. And thank you very much for the people who watched it and asked the questions. We're also planning another event under China Local Global Project later this month. To get the invitation and the links to this event, please subscribe to our newsletters and follow us on YouTube. Thank you once again, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.